It was strange to be descending to a planet while surrounded by small windows. Most of our planetary visits these days were direct landings in the ship, not leaving it parked in a bustling dock near orbit, then taking public transit down to the surface. At least this shuttle had chairs and seat belts. With this kind of long drop on all sides, even I might have felt a little unsteady on my feet. And I wouldn't want to stumble against any of the strangers here. Most of them were shorter than me. I looked over at Paint and Captain Sunlight to see how they were doing. Heat seekers in general weren't fond of heights, and Paint in particular did not like them. Unsurprisingly, Captain Sunlight sat calmly in her chair, yellow scales gleaming under the lights, eyes closed like she was meditating, expression as serene as ever. She dipped her head forward to sniff delicately at the book-like thing mounted to the seat back in front of her. Paint, on the other hand, had her own orange snout buried in the open pages of her complimentary seat-mounted book, and her eyes were screwed shut tightly. I glanced between the two of them. "Does that smell good?" I asked. "No," Paint's muffled voice said. "Mediocre at best. They need to refresh the seaside page, and their choice of fruits is boring. But it's a distraction. Are we almost there?" A look out the nearest window, which I just now realized was at my head height above theirs, showed a distant view of the cityscape with the sun sinking behind us. A lovely scene, though not what I'd call close. I tried to sound upbeat as I said, "We've still got a little while to go, but it shouldn't be too long now." Captain Sunlight kept her eyes closed while she said calmly, "Be glad they installed the scent books. When I visited as a child, the only distraction was my siblings, and none of them smelled particularly good." Paint snorted in laughter, face still in the book. "I bet." She paused, then added, "Did your aunt and uncle export things back then, too?" The captain shook her head. "No, this is a relatively new business. That's why I'm so glad to help them out. They're just starting to get really successful, and the way the local mail system is backed up because of the holidays could put a dent in customer satisfaction. But a direct shot on our ship will be nice and quick. Beneficial for them and multiple deliveries with one pickup for us. Good business all around. This arrangement suits everyone." Paint said, "Except for this part of the trip." "Yes, except for this part of the trip." I smiled quietly. Paint could have stayed back on the ship with everybody else, but she'd wanted to meet Captain Sunlight's extended family. The two of them had been friends since long before the captain got promoted. Plus, the description of the family home had included something cryptic about good smells, and I suspect that was a bonus as well. I was coming along because the captain had wanted 3 people to wrangle the cart full of packages. I was a good middle ground between strong enough to be helpful and narrow enough to fit through heat-seeker doorways without catching a bug leg or overly muscly arm on a doorframe. Height was another matter, of course, but I had ducked my way through many a low doorway in my time, and I was confident in my ability not to smack my forehead on anything. I leaned toward the porthole and looked out the distant ground, watching the sunset catch on tiny windows far below. As the shuttle sped toward its destination, that light moved, flashing from one part of town to another, lighting up buildings and ground transportation as it went. It was a striking view. Another minute later, and we might have missed it. I said, "It's a pity you don't like looking out the windows. It's really pretty down there." Paint didn't move. "No thanks." Captain Sunlight smiled. "Care to describe it for us?" I studied the play of lights. The sunset is reflecting off windows and windshields, making the city sparkle as we pass. Some of the roads full of traffic look like glittering necklaces winding through town, and the houses are like a handful of jewelry scattered across the hills. "That does sound pretty," the captain said. Paint said, "But what is it in smells?" "Well," I said, "it would be a lot of little sharp spikes of scent together in a rolling wave like a breeze passing through a field full of really memorable flowers." Paint considered. "Yeah, okay, I like that. And the clouds over there are about level with us, lit up all pink and peachy like the candy algae Blip and Blop brought back that one time." "Ooh, that was delicious. Okay, it sounds very nice out there, but it's still too far to the ground." "Not as far as it was," I said, as the landing pad grew beneath us. A faint change in engine pitch suggested reverse thrusters, or a change in the degree of gravity manipulation, or whatever kind of tech the shuttle was using. I don't know, it's not my specialty. Captain Sunlight must have heard it because she opened her eyes. "Almost there." Paint sighed in relief, eyes still closed. "Oh, good." The captain patted her on the shoulder. "The drop box would have been worse." Paint turned her head slightly and opened one eye. "How?" "Bigger windows." "Yeah, that's worse." I craned my neck back for a glimpse at the space elevator that reached up to the docks. a technological spear stabbing into the sky like the kind of thing that religions are based on. I asked, "Isn't it supposed to be faster than these shuttles?" Captain Sunlight told me, "Yes, but it leads to the wrong part of town. My family lives closer to the shuttle station." "Right, that makes sense." Paint stuck her face back in the book. "Tell me when we're there." The artificial gravity made a comical bounce like the shuttle had hiccuped, and the view outside the window showed a stable landing pad. The sun had just set. Captain Sunlight said, "We're here," and unfastened her seatbelt. Paint and I hurried to follow as the other passengers shuffled towards the door. Once outside, my impression of the place was that it felt like a comfortable summer night. Warm breeze, enough light in the sky from the fading sun to rival the electricity of the city, and heat still radiated up from the sun-warmed pavement. It smelled like asphalt, jet fuel, and several competing perfumes. Captain Sunlight led the way through the crowd, which was mostly other heat-seekers with a few Frillians. "Smells just like I remember it," she said. "This way." She found the ground transportation that would go straight to her family's street, a hover bus that was a similar riding experience to the shuttle, except for its length. This thing was snake-long in 3 segments, each with a nifty little rotating section where it hinged to turn corners. I chose a seat in one of those parts, enjoying the way the floor moved. Paint shook her head and sat in what she probably considered a more sensible location, with the captain beside her. Normally we'd stay together when out on business, but it wasn't like they'd lose track of me. Everyone else on this bus was elbow height and covered in scales. When we reached our stop and got out, there was a huddle of Frillians who averaged out at human size, which felt both normal and strange for a moment. Then Captain Sunlight led the way past, down a sidewalk made of rubberized brown pavement that smelled vaguely like strawberries, and the architecture brought things back into feeling exotic. Every building was a single story tall, and I could see over most of the rooftops. It was all gentle curves and bright colors, though the gathering darkness under the reddish streetlights made it hard to say exactly which colors. Captain Sunlight led us to one house out of many, this one with a domed roof, and as we got close I realized that the pattern I had taken for the leaves of spreading vines was actually a collage of clawed handprints, tiny ones at the bottom getting bigger as they went up. While the captain pressed a button somewhere that made a crescendo of chimes sound inside, I looked around to see that yes, all the houses on this street were covered in handprints. I wondered how many cousins Captain Sunlight had, and how often they got to put new handprints on the wall. Maybe it was a birthday tradition. I'd have to ask when I got a chance. Then the door swung open and several voices were talking over each other, welcoming us inside. I went last, ducking low. Once the door was shut behind me, I saved everyone some awkwardness and just sat down on my heels. Then I took in the sights. Also the smells. While the home was visually charming, all warm lights and painted walls with furniture and people everywhere, the smell was a burst of potpourri and black pepper. I conquered the urge to sneeze and was proud of myself for that. Captain Sunlight was finishing the rounds of greeting each family member with the heat-seeker version of a hug, rubbing cheeks like they were cats scent-marking each other. I heard someone comment to her, "You smell like space," and wondered what smell that was. Paint, meanwhile, was going with the equivalent of a bow, chin lift, so everyone was baring their necks at each other. It was interesting to watch for the split second before the closest heat-seeker greeted me. "Hello and welcome," he said, sounding both elderly and pleased. His scales were a faded beige, and a couple were even missing. He tipped his chin towards the ceiling. "Here, let me get you a cushion." He was gone before I could do more than raise my own head and thank him. Another elder took his place, her own scales a yellow-green and her voice a little stronger. She greeted me and began introducing everyone. I immediately lost track, but pretended to keep up. Greetings came from all sides. A large tasseled pillow was thrust between people. Then the old man appeared and set it down with ceremony in front of me. I made a point of thanking him graciously as I scooted forward to sit on it cross-legged. I didn't kick anyone with my long human legs, but it was a near thing. Captain Sunlight appeared beside me, towing Paint, and stood there to talk with someone whose yellow scales were speckled with black, like an artist had scattered watermelon seeds over her. For all I knew, someone had. Scale painting was uncommon, but not unheard of. The rest of the cheerful crowd settled down to observe this conversation. My keen sense of deduction told me that this was probably the aunt who had invited us here in the first place. They were talking business, numbers and locations, and all very no-nonsense. They didn't need any input from me. Paint was having a quiet and enthusiastic side conversation with someone about the scented heat bracelets they were wearing. Nobody was addressing me, so I admired the decorations. This main entry room had the higher domed ceiling, colored in a lovely mural of the sun and clouds. Lots of hooks held decorative paper bird things that looked handmade. I was wondering how often they had to dust those to keep them clean when the business conversation wrapped up. "Agreed," said Captain Sunlight in the carrying tone of someone finalizing an agreement in front of an eager crowd. All the family members made a single cheer in unison, then dissolved into conversation again. This time the speckled aunt quieted them. "Everyone go pick seats at the dining circle. Be sure to leave space for our guests. We'll be along in just a moment." Oh, apparently we were staying for dinner. I suppose that made sense. I kept my elbows in as the chattering crowd filed through a door somewhere, leaving the three of us alone with the aunt and uncle. He turned out to be an unassuming golden-brown fellow who blended in with the walls surprisingly well. Captain Sunlight asked her aunt quietly, "Did you have something else to discuss?" "Just a minor favor to ask," the aunt said with a glance at me. "Uh-oh." Then she pointed up at the paper decorations. "Our hover stool has broken and we haven't been able to take down the flights from last holiday. Perhaps someone with a bit of height could unhook them for us." I snorted in amusement at the look at Captain Sunlight's face. She said, "That's why you wanted me to bring a tall crewmate, so you didn't have to go to the store for a new hover stool during the rush?" The aunt spread her hands innocently. "Always efficient," she said with the tone of someone reciting a mantra. Captain Sunlight sighed. "It is efficient, I'll give you that." She turned to me. "Would you mind? You can set them on that table there." "Sure thing," I said, getting to my feet. The center of the dome was just about high enough for me to stand up straight. With the sun mural up there and the warm lights aimed up at it, I felt almost like I was outside in the daytime as I carefully unhooked the paper birds. Maybe a convincing stagecraft version of day. Working carefully, I gathered all of them onto the table without damaging any or bumping into anyone in the process. It helped that the 4 heat seekers stood to the side, talking about the items ready for export. "All done," I said, folding back down onto the cushion. I was pretty sure we'd be moving into the next room in just a moment, but I felt awkward looming over everyone. And the aunt was giving gifts. "Call it a free sample," she said, handing Captain Sunshine a collection of angular glass beads on strings. "Necklaces?" "Yes, necklaces. These ones are pressure-activated with a shut-off at the clasp. Refillable. A popular model, especially with our newest off-world dealers clients." The captain thanked her, then handed a necklace to Paint and one to me. I didn't need Paint's delighted exclamation to figure out that these were a scent thing. Fortunately, they held a pleasant sort of perfume as far as my preferences went. Kind of cinnamony, and the shut-off was easy to lock in place. It wouldn't do to gas myself during polite conversation. And also it was pretty. I put the necklace on while Paint gushed about the beautiful range of scents, and I admired the string of glittering cubes set against my dark shirt. Paint looked up at me. "Oh, does this look like what you saw out the window?" I smiled. "It does, and it even comes with scents so you can appreciate it too." Paint ran a claw along the string, tapping each bead and inhaling deeply. "Beautiful," she announced. Captain Sunlight told her aunt, "You do good work." The aunt beamed. "Of course we do. Now come sample the food. Your cousins have been fighting over who got to plan the meal, so we let everybody make their own offering. It ought to be a delicious mess." The uncle spoke up, leading the way. "And you haven't seen our new dining circle yet." "That's right, they haven't. Right this way. Watch your head on the doorway." That last part was directed at me. I did my best to walk bent over with dignity, following the others into the next room where a festive conversation was underway. The dining circle turned out to be a giant round table, with an outer ring set lower than the rest, holding everyone's plates. The plates were empty so far, while the promised variety of dishes sat along the edge of the top circle, waiting to be scooped, forked, tonged, and grabbed from. There was a centerpiece made of crystal flowers. Once we honored guests were shown to our seats, another cushion for me. The pale elder from before set the table, slowly spinning. Another chair went up and the grabbing began. Captain Sunlight sat beside me, and I was grateful for her brief descriptions of what each passing dish was made of. I picked out a selection from the many options while Paint exclaimed over how good they all smelled, and I had to agree. Also, the crystal centerpiece sparkled under the lights as the table turned, and it was spectacularly beautiful, even with no scent at all.